So I have a question, Mike.
Yeah.
So are you saying that the idea would be to violently overthrow the government and then take over and make a socialist, communist country, right?
Well, as I mentioned, in the United States, we have such freedom of speech that to advocate for the revolutionary overthrow of the government is illegal. And so, of course, I would not be committing an illegal act by advocating for the revolutionary overthrow of the government. However, as a Marxist-Leninist Maoist, I would simply note heavily that the Bolsheviks and the Chinese had a very successful, and the Cubans, and any other Marxist-Leninist organizations, had a very successful form of revolution where they overthrew the government or seized the government, replaced everything with working class institutions, and then used that to build socialism. And I would just highly recommend that we look very hard at that model and consider its relative merits. But again, I wouldn't advocate that overthrow of the government. Right. But that's, yeah, and so this was Mao's position. And this is why it was so essential to combat liberalism. If you overthrow the government and you have a bunch of people who are trained in liberalism, who are trained in looking after themselves, not confronting hard issues, letting things slide, you're going to get a lot of corruption. And so this is another reason why we would need to combat liberalism, is because someday we're going to be successful. And on that day, we need to have purged most of the liberalism out of our systems. Does that answer your question? Any additional questions, objections, concerns? So you will all henceforth uphold Mao Zedong thought and combat liberalism. Yes.
And I just asked, like, what, like, on a personal level, do you try to do in order to, you know, combat that in yourself? Again, you gave the example of drinking a lot or whatever else, but what type of things, like, say if you go to church, you're supposed to read the Book of Mormon every day. You wake up and read your scriptures and say your prayers, and that's supposed to kind of keep you on the right path, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the churchgoers, or if there's any. It almost sounds like it's kind of a similar thing. So, what type of things do you do to kind of help you to avoid some of these things you're mentioning?
Just on a personal,
stay motivated for you on a personal level. To stay motivated to make sure you're spending your time in a way that's useful rather than, you know, kind of just wasting time being drunk or whatever.
well, and again, I mean, this is a real point. It's very easy for me to practice liberalism in the United States, right? I can go anywhere, buy alcohol, and, you know, get drunk, and I don't drive anywhere. So, you know, as long as I stay home, there's no apparent downside to it. So what I always try and do, on a personal level, I try and limit my intake, or I only try to intake after I've completed all the work that I need to get done. So as a personal routine, and I've actually been somewhat slack about this recently, because those of you who know, I've been engaged in a big project with the Constitution. It just got finished. And instead of moving forward like I should have, I took a little bit of time for myself, and so now I need to get back to work. What I recommend everyone do is, as soon as you wake up or are ready for the day, I create an order of the day. And I write down the list of things I need to accomplish in that day. And I check that list to make sure at least 2 things on that are revolutionary, or help the revolutionary cause in a concrete way. So normally this is pretty easy because there's always emails to send out, projects to coordinate, committees to coordinate, you know, people to call. And then if I can't find enough to do then I create something, like read Mao's Combat Liberalism, read Kropotkin's Conquest of Bread, right? And so in this case, I always make sure that my order of the day includes enough revolutionary activities that although I'm an incredibly imperfect and flawed human being, almost every single day I can go to bed and say concretely, with a concrete order of the day finished, this is what I did for the revolution today. And again, it's not perfect. I'm not perfect. I often fall prey to liberalism, as I'm sure many of you know. But I try to uphold Marxism and practice Marxism towards myself as well as others. And also, one of the personal flaws that I have that maybe none of you share is I'm incredibly critical of people. And I often have to ask myself, whenever I'm about to criticize someone, I always have to ask myself, is this something, one, I would say to their face? But again, you'll notice that criteria still allows you to practice liberalism. Because if you don't actually say it to their face, you could always think, oh yeah, I would say that to their face. Oh yeah, I would say that to their face. And then you see them, and you don't say it to their face. So I ask not just would I say that to their face, or two, have I said that to their face, or would I, or something very similar. And in most of the cases of the people I'm critical of, I make sure to do that. And then the next thing I do is I always make sure, is this person essential for the revolutionary struggle? And can my criticism be in any way helpful to them? Again, I'm not perfect at it. I'm again, going from my background, I was a Marxist-Leninist. I was the Marxist-Leninist here, confronted on all sides by ideologies that viewed me as either dogmatic or impractical, and any positive project was doomed to fail from the beginning. And of course, the very fact that I'm talking to you right now at the RSU shows that it wasn't. But that kind of, to be perfectly blunt, kind of bittered me. And I noticed, so I'm very critical of other revolutionaries, but theoretically, if I imagine some conversations that some of you might have, a lot of people might find themselves very critical of their fellow Mormons, or their fellow students, or their fellow workers who have a bad knowledge or a mistaken idea. And so when you think about the people in Utah especially, it has seemed to me that many leftists are prone to be critical of them. And so I would just encourage them to reconsider that criticism and make it in the form of public, helpful, objective criticism. Does that answer anything? Okay. Any additional questions, objections? Okay. Well then, I hope that you will all uphold Mao Zedong thought, even if you're not a Maoist, and combat liberalism.